Hey, Hardin County, it's Michelle Lavis. We had a special meeting today up at the city building for a regionalization water discussion with Wessler. So I did attend that. The commissioners were there. Luke Underwood was there. Mark Dahl for the grants were there. A couple city council, John Schwimmer, the mayor, Cindy were all there. And so, and John Cross was there on the phone. So he was listening in. And it was really just a very beginning discussion from Wessler as far as, what the interest is in regionalization of water. So the city of Kenton has their water plant is in a floodplain. So if it would flood and contaminate the wells, that would be a disaster. And so, working with the EPA to say, hey, the city needs to be on a timeline of building a new plant. It's, these timelines are 10, maybe 15 years out. I mean, there is a span of time that, where you're going to kind of have to fix what you have. So they're going to have to put some money into the current water plant to keep it up and running and, up to standard. And, so you kind of do this Band-Aid fix, and then you're going to, in the meantime, be planning a regionalization plan to, service your Kenton area. Now, there's a couple conversations that, sorry about my voice here, but there's a couple conversations happening. One is the city of Kenton has already contracted with Wessler to look at and evaluate their current water plant, because, that's where the big need is right now. Sewer's always next on the docket. And so they're in contract with that. What Wessler's going to do is take that plan that they're already working on and say, okay, here's a new location for your water plant. Here's the new technology. Here's, what you guys can do to service your current area. But there's always a balance with your service area and then bringing in other people. So, I mean, the big ones would be Myers and Root Addition there on the outskirts of town, to bring them in, because is it Myers is on wells and septics out there, and then Root has their own little sewer package plant that is doing okay, but it's going to need some maintenance. And so those are, and Myers already is on the EPA watch list for sewer contaminants, that the leach beds and things aren't doing well enough. And so it's leaching out untreated kind of water. And so that is already on the radar. And so, kind of expanding the reach of Kenton for their current building, you can, okay, so that's kind of the Kenton's deal. And this is where you would have like a privatization of the Kenton water plant. They would go after grants and money to fund that, right? So, and that's kind of where we're at. The other discussion, where is the regionalization comes in, is that in Hardin County, it looks like our water can be pumped kind of everywhere. So we have a ridge line in Summit Street in Kenton. And so you have a watershed that goes south and you have a watershed that goes north. And that makes a difference when you're talking about sewer. But water, it looks like right now the Wessler's going to go back and confirm and create a rough map based on that ridge line, what can be done with water, what can be done with sewer, so that we can kind of see what those look like. But water can kind of go everywhere. So the idea is, if you wanted to pump water to Forest or Patterson or Mount Victory, Alger, what does that look like from a bigger standpoint? Now, preliminarily, the Kenton would own their water plant. And if, say, Alger wanted to tie onto that water plant, they would have a master meter put in, wherever the line would end, they would put the master meter in, and everything from there on to Alger would be the responsibility of Alger. They could get their own grants for that. They could, they would get their loans to maintenance that, and then it would go into their system. The same would be for anybody else. So that's kind of where you have a privatized water system, and other entities can hook on. So at this time, if your village or your area is needing to get a water plant, to be in compliance or just better quality, you can kind of be in the beginning of these conversations and have that kind of built into the plan, right? That it's like, okay, we're going to do the Band-Aid fix for now, and then the plan is to spend, and you're talking, 9 miles could be $14 million, which I know sounds like a lot of money, but not necessarily when you're looking at what maintaining a plant would be. You would still have to maintain your pipes. So if you have leaky pipes or you have bad infrastructure in that village, you would still have to do that, but the water treatment would be there for you. So it's a chunk of change is what I'm saying to get that out there, depending on how many miles. 3 miles, well, I guess it depends too, on what the groundwork would look like in that. So okay, you got your master meter, you have your water piped out there. This is raw water is what they consider. So if you're out in the country, you are not going to be tied into that system, right? That it's not treated water, it's just raw water. And so anybody in the country who says, hey, I don't want to be forced into this, there is no forcing you into it. You're gonna go out your pipe. You're gonna have to have like a pump station to get the water down there, and then at the end you're gonna have some sort of treatment. So they talk about the longer the water has to travel, the older it gets, and so the more treatment you're going to have. He talked about TTHMs with the chlorine have to be addressed in kind of that sediment type of stuff. And so when the water goes out to the village, then you would have a simple chemical treatment type process that would, treat the water that then would go into the city pipes. And so there is a little bit of that. He talked about you would have a chemical feed, which is relatively inexpensive. You'd have electrical panels, a booster station, meters, those kind of things. And as part of your maintenance costs, these pipes, he was talking about Bluffton did this 20 years ago. They went over with Ottawa to get their water, and it's a chunk of change, but they got like a 30-year loan. And so they're 20 years into their loan. The PVC pipe that's going along, really, it could be a 100-year pipe. It's not anything that has a high maintenance cost on it. The pump stations and things, they do have a cost to maintain them and somebody to kind of watch over them. But it's minimum. It's a doable maintenance process. The other part of it, obviously is paying the loan on the materials that you have, but if you get past your 30 years, right, then that infrastructure cost drops off and you're just doing your maintenance cost and your water usage. So on water usage, I thought this was really interesting. There's a lot of great questions as far as how do you know that you're going to get the water that you guarantee. And basically it goes down to usage. So you may say you get 300,000 gallons to Alger a day, right? They have a lock on that $300,000. So if your plant can, process 1 million gallons a day, Alger's getting 300,000 of that, Kenton's getting 500,000 of that. Mount Victory could get 200,000 of that, so you kind of have your allotted water. If for some reason an industry would come in and they would say, hey, we need 500,000 gallons of water, you can't steal from the other people. They have their allotted amount. Now, this industry or another village that would want to come in and regionalize after the fact, you can do plumbing, kind of plumb up additional filters, right? So the industry or whatever would say, okay, you're going to pay for this additional filter. You're going to pay for additional chemicals. They would have to pay for and supply that additional add-on to the current plant to get more usable water. And so, ultimately there would be a cap of what you can do. He also talked about, we only have so much water in the wells. You can get surface water. We have a great aquifer under Kenton, and so you can only go to the ability of the water that you have, right? So you can cap out there, but within the plant itself, you can do modifications to get more water usage. So, but each village would have an allotment every day that they would pay a flat rate for. If you would go over that, you would pay an additional charge like anything else, and, maybe an overage cost, if you would maybe have a fire or something that, was kind of devastating. As long as the water's there, you would pay a cost, but it would be there. So, that's how like a privatized system would work, right? You kind of Kenton's kind of owning it and then, kind of selling the water. The other thing that is a possibility is a district. Now, Wessler is kind of going to go back and talk with, because that's more of on a lawyer side, a contract side of how a district would be set up and how, the contract would kind of come out. And so they have like a presentation that they're going to send over to look at as far as the difference between a privatized system and a district system. Now, a district system is going to be where, because we have the ridge line, you may say, under here, on the south is a district and on the north is a district. And, what's that look like? And the benefit, I mean, there's always pros and cons, but a benefit of a district is that everybody in the district is pulling together for these initial costs, right? It's not Kenton kind of funding it and then selling the things. Everybody's going to come together to pay for the water plant. You're going to have a board that's going to run it. You're going to have a representative from each village, or whoever's in the district is going to be on that board. They're going to be, determining the rates and, watching over those finances. It kind of comes out of the municipalities and up into a board structure. The benefit in that is that the pipes, on privatized, the pipes are managed by the villages in the city. If it's a district, the district would be responsible for maintaining all of the infrastructure. So the southern district would, come in and they would make sure if there's a water main break, they would be addressing that and not the city. So, kind of definitely has some implications of what that would look like, but it's something to consider, what is going to be best for, villages and stuff if they're interested in coming in, kind of offshoring that responsibility from maybe a city council to, a higher district may be beneficial. So you would have like one pumper tank for your entire district, right? Instead of, this village having a truck and the city having a truck and the city having worker, everybody kind of divided out. The district would service its own, with its one sanitarium, it's one truck, it's one crew would be servicing everybody. And so definitely something to look at and to be interested in. Okay, so something else to look at is there are several different timelines that, Forest is in a different timeline than Dunkirk, than Alger, than Kenton. Even Ada everybody's on a timeline of how to fix their water or sewer infrastructure, right? And so kind of coordinating those for immediate needs and long-term needs. And so pretty much everybody is going to have to be in a Band-Aid situation where you're going to take your current infrastructure, fix it the best you can for the length of time that you need till a regionalized or a new system comes in, right? And so everybody's going to have to do that. It's going to still cost millions of dollars just to Band-Aid a system. We also have two different issues with water and sewer. Water is definitely easier. It's easier to distribute the water, to clean the water. Those things are relatively easy. The sewer aspect of it, okay, so the water is where people are like, hey, I want good quality water coming out of my faucets. So it's important in that respect, but it's easier to manage. On the other side, you have the sewer, which most people say, out of my house, not my problem, but definitely much more complicated and much more costly and a necessary on the other side of the water to get rid of the water that you are bringing in. And so Forest is on a schedule for an EPA with their lagoons. They have 2 lagoons that are basically completely full. Dunkirk is also they're putting in $500,000 to work on their lagoons. Alger had just been put on a schedule yesterday for their lagoons. So if you're not familiar with wastewater, you flush your pipes, it goes to a treatment facility, where you're gonna strain it out. I mean, it depends on how it's done, but the easiest system is a lagoon system, and it's basically giant ponds that the sewage goes into. The bacteria process that water, and then it kind of flows out the other way clean. Like the sediment kind of comes down, the heavy stuff comes down, and the cleaner stuff comes to the top and is siphoned off. It goes into your groundwater. It is filtered through the sand and stuff there, and then it goes back into your water table, which then gets pumped out to your water facilities. Those have to be dredged every 20 years. I mean, it costs $1 million, $1.5 million to do that, to keep them functioning. Forest has not dredged their lagoons in 60 years. So you can imagine, they pretty much fill up. So your workable water area and your bacteria, they're not getting that deep rotation that's needed to process it correctly. Think kind of like a compost pile. So if they keep the sewer lagoons that they have, right, it tops out. Most of these places have 2 lagoons. The new standard is 3 lagoons. So are they going to have to dig another lagoon to manage water? Is it scalable? Lagoons can only hold so much usage. Which means if an industry comes in, maybe you can't handle that outflow. The other problem with those sewers is that in the old days, they used to combine the storm water with the sewer water. That's proven to be ineffective. It puts too much water through your system. And so now they have to separate. So now it's a chore. How do you separate something that was combined in the beginning? And so fixing lagoons, a couple $1 million to fix your lagoons is just part of maintenance. That's just what's going to happen. And so when you're looking at those systems, you're still going to have to put money into those every 20 years. And, what is it? They didn't talk so much about what it looks like on the sewer side for regionalization, but it's something that is a big issue, especially in forest, with their air vac system is a big issue. And so it's when you're kind of looking at, both of them together, are you going to combine them, put them under one sanitary system rather than a water district and a sewer district? So that's kind of where people are at right now. The regulations, he did say, that are coming down for these lagoons is much stricter. The ammonia levels are much harder to achieve. And so it's a no-win situation for rural America, where it costs money to maintain these things, but the EPA is bringing down the levels to a degree that it's hard to reach those levels. And so we're kind of pushing you out of the price range of what a village can sustain itself. And so that's where the regionalization comes in, that you're combining your forces to get a bigger system that can reach those regulation levels. So I don't know if I admit, he did talk about loans and grants, and those are really tricky as far as the different timelines. And you may get this grant money, but not this one, and then this one will come in, but this one's expired. And so it's really a game of getting the right grants at the right time to pay for a chunk of the project so the project becomes feasible. So that is a lottery type game that comes into play when you're looking at a good plan. Like if you're going to spend all this time and energy and money to do these individual, Forest, Dunkirk, Alger, McGuffey, even Ada, when you're Mount Victory, don't forget you guys down there, that when you're looking at the time and effort and money that goes into each of these little pods, being able to, let's pool our resources and concentrate on an effort to get the best deal for everybody that we can from a county situation. I was very pleased to hear from the commissioners, especially Joe Sherman. Good for you for being proactive. So their commissioners are definitely interested in having another regionalization meeting with Wessler. So that Wessler kind of said, right now they're working with Kenton, but they can take, it's going to probably be about $50,000 for the basic. There's some maybe add-ons that you can do with their plan to look at the county as a whole, right? So how do we assist these smaller villages to make it doable? Let's look at economic development when we're talking about housing, when you're talking about infrastructure for businesses, and revitalizing Hardin County as a whole. And so they're interested. They're going to go back and talk about that. And so I was really encouraged to hear them have some investment, not just, I think some of the old guard is that, well, that's forest, that's your municipality, that's not my concern, Alger's not my concern. And maybe that mindset is changing a little bit to say, how can we look at Hardin County holistically, not just in economic development, but in infrastructure and putting us back on the map. So I was really pleased to hear that, and we'll be looking forward to those conversations in the future that are going to be had with Wessler. So stay tuned to that. I hope that we get invited to that meeting so that we can stay on top of the new and improved Hardin County that we're looking at, and some hope and some joining together as a community. So anyways, I'm sure there's some things I missed. Like I said, we will be continuing this journey with the different communities and with our county as a whole. So, all right. So thanks for sticking around. And I know it's a long video, but it's very important. And it's the first step towards really great continued changes in Hardin County. So, all right. We'll see you guys later. Bye.